Real estate agents called it the house that wouldn't sell. But I don't believe in ghosts. At least I didn't, until I spent one night inside. I work as a real estate agent in a small American town. We have this one property that's been on the market for over 5 years. A beautiful 19th century house, big, old, and full of charm. But no one could sell it. Every agent who tried either quit the job or refused to talk about it afterward. When I asked why, people would just say, "There's something wrong with it." When my boss offered me the listing, I accepted immediately. I wasn't afraid of ghosts, just bad wiring and superstitious clients. The house stood on the edge of town, surrounded by a forest of dying oaks. When I opened the front door, I was hit by the smell, damp wood, and something oddly sweet, like decaying flowers. The hallway walls were lined with old black and white photos, smiling families, children, portraits of long-gone owners. But the strange thing was, every photo had the eyes scratched out. I assumed vandals had broken in at some point. Still, something about the house made me feel watched. To prove to myself that nothing was wrong, I decided to spend the night there. Just me, my flashlight, and my laptop to keep me company. Around midnight, I started hearing sounds. At first, light creaking, footsteps above me, maybe just the wind or old wood. Then, the sound of light switches clicking on and off. I looked toward the kitchen. The lights flickered, then died completely. I took my flashlight and went to check. In the living room, I noticed the wallpaper slightly bulging out, like the wall itself was breathing. When I leaned closer, I heard something from inside, whispering, "You shouldn't have come back." I stumbled backward, dropping my flashlight. The beam landed on one of the old photos above the fireplace, and this time, the eyes weren't scratched out anymore. They were there, and they were staring right at me. I ran to the front door, but it wouldn't open. It was as if someone was holding the handle from the other side. Then I heard a moan beneath the floorboards, at first faint, then clearer. A voice calling my name. "John." My blood ran cold. No one knew I was spending the night here. No one, except my boss. Then I heard a loud thud from the kitchen. When I turned, I saw that the door to the basement was open. I could have sworn I'd locked it earlier. From the darkness below came a cold draft, and that same sweet, rotten smell. I went down the stairs, shining the flashlight ahead. The walls were damp brick, the air heavy and still, but in the far corner, the dirt floor looked freshly disturbed, like someone had been digging recently. In the middle of it stood a small wooden sign. On it, one word, "Sold." My chest tightened, then the flashlight flickered, and I saw a figure standing by the stairs, tall, pale, with no face. "You were supposed to show the house," it whispered. "Now, you'll never leave it." The light went out completely, but I could hear it breathing. Then, the sound of dirt shifting beneath my feet, like something digging from below. I ran. I don't remember how I got out, only that I didn't stop until I reached my car. The next morning, I went back with the police. The basement was empty, no sign of digging, no wooden sign. But when I checked the company records later that day, there was a new entry in the property logs. The house had been sold the previous night, under my name. And next to my profile in the office system, someone had added a note. "Missing during showing. Presumed deceased." In the Soviet Union, There were no serial killers. At least, that's what the newspapers said. But an old police archive file, case number 47, tells a different story. It was sealed until 2001. And after reading it, I understand why. I worked at a regional archive in Russia, digitizing old Soviet police files. Most of them were boring: thefts, drunks, and domestic incidents. But one day, I found a folder marked Top Secret. 1983. Saratov region. It was dusty, sealed, and labeled with the name of an investigator, Captain A. V. Losev. Inside were yellowed photos, handwritten reports, and one audio tape labeled Interrogation, March 3rd, 83. The first photo made my stomach twist. A man in a long coat, standing at a bus stop at night. But his face was smooth, like someone had erased it. Between November 1982 and March 1983, 7 people went missing in the Saratov region. All men in their 20s, all walking home after night shifts. The official explanation was always the same: alcohol, personal problems, accidents. But each one was last seen in the same place, a small, foggy bus stop on the outskirts of town. Locals said a man in a gray coat and leather gloves was often seen watching people from across the street. No one ever saw his face clearly. The file included a transcript from a man named Gorilov, the only known survivor who ever saw the suspect. It was late, maybe 2 in the morning. The fog was thick. The streetlights barely worked. A man approached me, tall, wearing a long coat. I looked at him and realized he had no face, just skin, smooth, like a wax figure. Then he spoke. His voice sounded wrong, like a broken radio. He asked me, "You're alone, right?" The transcript ended abruptly. On the next page, a police note. Witness Gorilov found dead in hospital. Cause: cardiac arrest. I found the audio tape labeled Interrogation, Suspect. I played it on an old reel-to-reel recorder. Static. Then a voice, deep, shaky, probably the investigators. "State your name." The reply didn't sound human, distorted, metallic, echoing through the static. "I have no name. You weren't supposed to see me." Then a horrible screech, like metal scraping glass. And finally, the sound of a chair falling over. That was the end of the recording. The final document in the file was a police report, dated March 5th, 1983. Captain A. V. Losev did not report for duty. Apartment found empty, door unlocked. Burn marks shaped like a human hand discovered on the wall. After that, the file ended. Case closed. No suspect identified. It was buried, literally, in the archive basement. That night, as I left work, I kept hearing footsteps behind me in the empty corridor. When I turned around, nothing. But in the reflection of a glass door outside, I saw him. A tall man in a gray coat, standing just behind me in the fog. I spun around. The street was empty. When I got home, I pulled out the photo from the file and froze. There was a reflection in the glass of the bus stop, a person holding a camera. And it wasn't Losev, it was me. A week later, the entire archive was temporarily closed for renovation. 2 days after that, I got a letter in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was an old black and white photograph of the same bus stop. Fog, streetlight, no people except one. A man in a gray coat standing far in the background. No face. On the back, in shaky handwriting, it said, "You're next." I never liked walking through our city park at night. It's old, with cracked paths and rusty lamps that buzz when the wind passes. At that hour, you only see stray dogs and people who have nowhere else to go. But last October, I started working as a night security guard, and that park was part of my patrol route. In the center stood a statue of a woman with closed eyes. It had always been there, as far as anyone could remember. People called it the girl who waits for dawn. The marble had grown dark with age, and her faint smile looked tired, like even the stone had lost hope. It started on my very first shift. Around 3 a.m, one of the security cameras flickered. On the screen, I saw something strange. The statue's shadow had shifted just slightly, as if her head had turned. I told myself it was just the light, and still, I went to check. When I reached the statue, the street lamp above it was buzzing faintly. She stood in her usual pose, head lowered, eyes closed. But when I got closer, I could swear her lips were slightly parted. I laughed it off. Fatigue, that's all. But when I returned to the guard shack and looked at the monitor again, the feed flickered once more. This time, she was smiling. I didn't want to go back, but I had to. This time, I placed a voice recorder at the base of the statue, just to prove to myself that nothing strange was happening. When I listened to the recording in the morning, the first minute was just wind. Then I heard breathing, heavy, slow, as if someone was standing right over the microphone. And then a woman's whisper, "I see you." I brought a flashlight and a small camera. I wanted to film her, to prove that I wasn't losing my mind. But when I looked through the camera's lens, I didn't see stone. I saw a woman, alive, pale-skinned with empty black eyes, smiling at me. I dropped the camera, and when I looked up, it was stone again. On the 4th night, my supervisor said I'd be working the route alone. The park was silent, too silent. The city noise, the wind, even my footsteps felt distant. When I reached the statue, it wasn't where it used to be. It had moved, 1/2 meter closer to the path. In her hand, something new, a small key. On the base, scratched into the stone, were the words, "For you." I didn't even have time to understand what it meant, because right then, her eyes slowly opened. The next morning, my coworker found my uniform at the base of the statue. The street light above was shattered, and there were bare footprints in the mud nearby. Since that night, they never hired another guard for the park. And the statue, she's smiling wider now,